Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lost in Translation show, where we explore yesterday to help mankind understand what's happening in the world today. My name's Simone. I'll be your host. Welcome, everyone. Over the last few years, most of us have heard about the so-called insurrection of January 6th. Many of us have also heard about the Oath Keepers. Was the media hype and agenda-driven commentary true, or are there more sides to these stories? This is what we're going to explore today. Here today with us is Stewart Rhodes. He's a disabled veteran paratrooper from the U.S. Army that served as an airborne long-range reconnaissance unit. He was injured and disabled in a night jump while doing rough terrain parachuting. He's an ex-firefighter and a Yale graduate and research scholar who clerked on the Arizona Supreme Court. Stewart also worked in D.C. on the staff of Congressman Ron Paul. He's a founding member of the Oath Keepers. He spent time in prison for the events surrounding January 6th. Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current and former military, police officers, and first responders. They pledge to fulfill the oath of all military and police officers to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Stewart spent 3 years in jail, over a year in solitary confinement. He refused to plead guilty to a crime that he did not commit, refused to bear false witness against President Trump, and maintained his innocence during the D.C. court trial. Staying loyal to his president and his country, he was sentenced to 18 years and later commuted by President Trump. He continues to pray for a full pardon today. He's going to be a really interesting conversation to hear about, his experiences and what he learned about his government, the people around him, and most of all, about himself. So before we get started today, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Leave any comments below. This really does help me out. If you would like to support the channel, my Venmo and Zelle accounts are listed in the comments section below. So welcome. Without further ado, Stewart Rhodes.
Hey, glad to be here. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you so much. You sound like you have a fascinating story, and I've seen you on a few other interviews, so I'm really looking forward to hearing about your experience. Was there anything you wanted to add to your background, or?
Well, I'm the founder of Oath Keepers,
Oh, you
so
are the
that was
founder.
yeah, that was my brainchild. Came out of here. So, and I founded that in 2009. I'd been part of the Ron Paul campaign in Nevada in 2008 presidential campaign, and after seeing the corruption inside of the Republican Party and how they stole the nomination from Congressman Paul, he really should have won that year. He really should have. Would have been a very different country. So I saw the corruption inside the GOP. I knew that, like Pat Buchanan said, the two political parties are really just two different wings on the same bird of prey. And I call it the uniparty. So I realized that we're in deep trouble. I didn't know at the time. There's John McCain on one side. On the other side, we did not yet know whether it was Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama was going to be their nominee, but I knew that we were in trouble either way. So that's why I started Oath Keepers, to focus on the police and military, those that would be given orders by the corrupt anti-constitution deep staters to violate your rights. I wanted them to say no, to understand the responsibility to say no. That's the whole point of the founders requiring an oath to the Constitution. They put that right in the Constitution itself in Article 6, a requirement that everyone in public service swear an oath to support and defend the Constitution. Of course, the politicians, most of them have no respect for the Constitution. But I believe most people that join the military and join the police forces, I believe they have good intent. But if they don't know the Constitution and they don't understand their responsibility under it, then they're more likely to go along with unconstitutional orders. That was the whole point of Oath Keepers at the outset.
And can you give us a little background on the things Oath Keepers did, and are they still active after the
Well, that's
January 6th?
well, that's a good question. So, so backing up to our initial, when we first started out, one of the first things we did that was became noteworthy is we were on the rooftops in Ferguson, Missouri during the riots there. And our first client was actually a black lady who owned a bakery, Natalie's Cakes and More. And during the daylight, when that riot first erupted, the first day they broke her windows, and some of the rioters threatened her and said, "Tonight we're going to come back and burn this whole bitch to the ground." They were cussing at her. this whole MFing bitch to the ground. I meant the whole block. Well, on that block were businesses like a Chinese owned or a Asian restaurant, a Korean owned beauty salon, just different businesses owned by different people, different races. But above them were apartments where you had uh, you had families living in those apartments. And so our local guys talked to her and said, "Do you want us to protect you?" And she said, "Yes." So with her permission, we showed up that night and our guys hopped up on the rooftop. And we had volunteers from all over the country, military veterans and police officers that showed up and took turns guarding that block. And so that block was not burned to the ground. So all around them, there were buildings being burned to the ground, but not that block. So we became pretty famous because of that. And that's one of our first security operations was we saw that, okay, if you're rich, if you're a big corporation or a wealthy person, you can afford to hire private security. You can afford to hire Gavin de Becker and Associates, or back then it was Blackwater, Triple Canopy. Any of these big military contractors have domestic use also. I don't think people know that. But so you can afford that if you're rich or if you're a big corporation. But if you're a small business owner like she was, like Natalie was, what are you supposed to do? She can't afford to hire anybody. So we filled that gap. We did that throughout the entire history of Oath Keepers. And during the Trump administration in particular, we protected Trump supporters in the streets. So we did that first at Trump's inauguration in Washington, D.C., January 20th, 2017. In fact, the night before, there was the deplorable ball, right, in D.C. of Trump supporters celebrating him winning. And there were four women that wanted to go to this ball, but they were afraid because Antifa was already raging in the streets and attacking Trump supporters. And so myself and another military veteran, we escorted them into the Deporah Ball. So that was our mission that night. The next day, we were in the streets again, escorting people. We gave volunteer escorts back to their hotel or back to the metro stops or back to their car. Because what Antifa does, they'll attack someone that's vulnerable. They're cowards. They're like little hyenas. They won't attack a lion, but they'll attack someone they consider to be, vulnerable. So disabled people, elderly women, families. So a big part of what we did throughout the entire Trump administration was protect Trump supporters in the streets. In Berkeley, California, twice, Portland, Oregon, multiple times, Boston, Dallas, Texas, all over the country. And when Act for America had a March Against Sharia nationwide day of speaking out against Sharia law, they had ex-Muslims who were talking about, what happens, a reality of what happens with radical Islam. And so a lot of these people that were speaking had death threats against them. So we stepped up and protected the venues, the rallies themselves, but also the speakers. So that's kind of a backdrop of what we did. And then at Trump rallies, because here's what happens at a Trump rally. Antifa knows when you go into a Trump rally, any Trump campaign rally, whether it was the first time or this last time, they know, or 2020, any of the three times actually, they know that when you go into a Trump rally, you're going to be disarmed because you got to go through Secret Service to get in. You can't carry anything in there. No pepper spray, no gun, no knife, nothing, right? So they know when you come back out and you walk into your car, you're going to be unarmed and vulnerable. So that's when they would attack Trump supporters. So we'd post our retired police and military outside the building. We'd coordinate with Secret Service about here's where we're going to be outside of your perimeter. Make sure they know who we are, how to identify our men, so there's no misunderstandings. And they were cool with us because they knew that's why we were there. And we would just have signs that said, if you want a volunteer escort an armed escort back to your car, or back to the train stop or whatever it is, just let us know. And we would have people that would walk up and say, yeah, I'd like an escort. So we did that throughout the Trump administration. And that's why the left hates us so much. That's why the deep state and Antifa, the deep state hates us because we're talking to the military and police about the responsibility to disobey unlawful orders. The radical left doesn't like us because we're getting in the way of their foot soldiers in the streets, suppressing free speech of Trump supporters. That's why we were hated and targeted from day one. And so when January the 6th came along, we were in DC to do what we've always done, protect Trump supporters. That's why we were there that day.
Um, so were you arrested on that day? I think we were talking earlier.
No.
It took them a while to come after you.
Yes. So what happened on January the 6th is I didn't go inside. And so I was standing on the outside because we were there to do security. We were doing security for two permitted events on Capitol grounds on the east side of the Capitol. Right outside the Capitol doors was Ali Alexander's event. We were protecting that event. We were also protecting a rally held by Latinos for Trump on Capitol grounds about a block north. It was called Area 7. That's a park next to the Senate office buildings. So there were two permitted events on Capitol grounds that we were responsible for as volunteer security. We were also protecting their VIP speakers. We had a personal security detail assigned to Roger Stone, for example, a four-man detail assigned to him. We had a larger, like 12, 13 people assigned to the speakers for Ali Alexander's event. They went down to President Trump's ellipse rally first. So our men went with them. So these are people that are in the VIP section of Trump's rally, President Trump's rally on the ellipse. And our guys are in the VIP section with them. And I got done watching his speech. They were escorting them up to the Capitol to go to speak at the event that Ali Alexander had planned right outside the Capitol doors. So that was our mission that day. Those personal security details for VIP speakers, protecting those two venues, those two rallies which were permitted on Capitol grounds, and also the general mission we always have of escorting any vulnerable Trump supporters who request our help. That's why we were there that day. And so when I heard about what's happening on the West Side, that there was people that were getting in altercations with the police. I went to the Capitol grounds. I just spoken at the Latinos for Trump event. Kelly Sorrell, who was our attorney at the time, had spoke there with me that morning. Both of us were speakers at that event, at the Latinos for Trump event. But then she got really cold. It was very cold that day. And were you there that day?
No, I wasn't.
Super, super cold. So she got really cold, and so one of our guys, one of our oath keepers, had a hotel room close by. So we took her to that hotel room to get warmed up, and we're watching President Trump's speech on the TV there in this guy's hotel room. Um, I had a retired police officer, Michael Green, who's also an ex-Army explosives expert, a sapper. He was our overall operations leader for our security details that day. I always put retired police in command because they can easily relate with local law enforcement a lot easier. Anytime we're operating in a city, we always contact law enforcement ahead of time, let them know we're coming. Our retired cops talk to the active duty cops, and when they know a police officer is in charge of the security detail, a lot of times they relax and they're a lot more, what's the right word? A lot more willing to cooperate and get along with us because they know another cop's in charge. So that's what I always do. So he was in charge of the security details that day, overall security operations. He called me and said, "Hey, there's Trump supporters that are storming the Capitol grounds." And I was like, "What do you mean?" So he showed me a couple of clips, some video clips that were being sent around of Trump supporters going past the barricades and also fighting with some cops. So I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go see what's going on." So I went to the Capitol with Kelly Sorrell and this other oath keeper. We went there. My goal was to find my guys who I knew were coming from the ellipse, walking up to the Capitol. I wanted to make sure they didn't get involved in any altercations that were going on the West Side between Trump supporters and law enforcement. I did not know at that time about Roseanne Boylan being killed. I did at that time. Ashley Babbitt had not yet been shot. Um, I did not know anyone had gone inside. So I'm just concerned about my guys not getting involved. What I did know was happening was some fistfights with cops. I didn't want that. So I'm looking for my guys. I'm on the northeast corner. I so it's a huge building and there's a huge crowd and you can hardly hear a thing. I'm trying to call and reach them. I was unsuccessful in being able to call and communicate with my people. So I just posted on our chats, if you are on Capitol grounds or coming to Capitol grounds, come to the northeast corner, rally up there with me. That's my point, was to keep them out of trouble. So that's where I was waiting for them. Unbeknownst to me, when the guys were escorting people from the Ellipse rally to the rally on the east side where Ali Alexander was going to be, some of the speakers they were guarding went up the steps. And so some of our guys went up the steps with their protectees because that's what they're there to do, is protect these people. So, and here's an important point. In November and December of 2020, there were massive stop the steal or you know, stolen election rallies. We were at both of those. Same thing, providing security for events. There were permitted events all around the Capitol in November. Then there were permitted events all around the Capitol again in December. And so the Trump supporters, it was common practice for them to attend permitted events. A lot of times little small stages were set up all around the Capitol. You also had a group called the Jericho March, which were Christians who were walking around the Capitol and praying. for restoration of our republic and return to godly principles. So we protected them as they did that in November and December. My point is that it was not some anomaly or, oh, we don't know why this happened for Trump supporters to go from some other rally like down at Freedom Plaza or the Ellipse and march to the Capitol. They had done that in November and they had done that in December. Back in November, they did a huge rally at Freedom Plaza, and then Alex Jones jumped on a bullhorn and marched them all the way to the Capitol. They were already planning on being in the street between the Supreme Court and the Capitol. That's where everyone tended to go and fill that whole street. And this is an important point too. In November and December, they filled the entire lawn of the Capitol. There was no prohibited area on the grass. No one said you can't be on the grass in November and December. So when January the 6th comes around, they expanded the perimeter far beyond what they had done in November and December. They put the bike rack barricades all the way out to the very edge of the Capitol lawn. How do you know that if you're down at the Ellipse? How do you know? Because what happened is that by the time the folks who were at the Ellipse walked up to the Capitol and got there, those barriers were gone. How do they know they're now on prohibited ground? So a lot of them were charged with being on prohibited ground or prohibited area when they had no idea. No signs are up. No one telling them they're trespassing. So that's just part of the setup. Is they grossly expanded the perimeter way beyond what they had done in November and December. So that's why they can say, oh, 1,500 or 2,000 or whatever it was, Trump supporters, violated the law that day or were on prohibited grounds. So that's one part of the big setup. But the other big part of it is the doors opened. Like on the east side of the Capitol, I found out after the fact. What happened is my guys were on the steps watching the people they were supposed to be guarding, and then the doors open from someone on the inside, opened those big doors. They just suddenly opened, and the whole crowd just funneled in. A lot of my guys got carried in against they were like being pressed. It's like being shot out of a toothpaste tube. Once someone stomps on it, you're not you got to go inside. So the crowd just pushed them in. That's the reality of what happened. That was 20 minutes after Congress recessed. And that was like at least 20, 25 minutes after other people already entered the Capitol. So that's what's kind of ironic, because after the fact, the media focused on this line of Oath Keepers walking up the steps and saying, oh, look at this. This is the assault formation of the Oath Keepers, an assault stack on the Capitol steps leading the attack. That's what the media spun. The media narrative out of the gate was the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys led the attack on the Capitol. So that's multiple layers of crap. There was no attack on the Capitol. It's just a protest that was funneled into the Capitol, I believe intentionally, for the purpose of allowing them to have an excuse to shut down the challenges to the election that were going on by members of Congress. And also, the big point is also to deflect attention from their own coup. They had pulled a coup in 2020. We were there to protest the coup, unconstitutional coup. They violated state election laws across the country, especially in the swing states. And that triggered a violation of Article 2 of the Constitution. Article 2 is very clear. It says that the legislatures of the states have the authority to establish the manner for selecting electors. Only state legislatures have that power. So anything that's done outside of what the state legislatures have mandated for how they select electors is unconstitutional. And state electors used to be picked by the state legislatures, right? Originally, they would just get together and pick their own electors. So there was no popular vote tied to the electors. It was just the state legislature decided. That was changed where the states passed laws that said, okay, we're going to tie our state electors to whoever wins the popular vote. That's still under state election law. So in 2020, they violated state election law, and that triggered a violation of Article 2 of the Constitution. That's why actually crazy, and people were like, "Oh, they had never proved in any court that there was enough election." They always say this, right? Not never there was not sufficient fraud to have changed the outcome. That's what they say. Well, how do you know? All the laws that are passed in the states to stop election fraud or make election fraud easier to discover, you violated all those laws. So how could you possibly know whether fraud's being committed? But I don't need to know fraud's being committed. But all I know, all I need to know is a violated state election law, and that triggered a violation of the Constitution. It's illegal and unconstitutional. So absolutely, they pulled a coup. And we learned later in the Time magazine article released in February of 2021, they pretty much do a limited hangout and admit that yes, we all got together. People on the political right and the left in the establishment got together and spent millions of dollars across the country training and advising local election officials and state election officials on how to conduct a save democracy by conducting an election during a pandemic. But they got together and decided how they're going to violate state election law and get away with it using the excuse of COVID-19. It was a massive conspiracy, absolutely a coup. So to cover for that, they have to project onto us what they're doing. They're committing a coup. They accuse us of that, but there was no coup by us. There was no insurrection. There was a protest that they had to twist and manipulate to make it look as bad as possible and then call it something it wasn't. Call it an insurrection. That's the bottom line.
Do you think that I know that the Second Amendment's been under fire, and what a lot of people always talk about gun ownership, but I think the real gist of that is that the citizens are allowed to create a militia and push back against the government. Do you think that's part of maybe what was going on? They wanted to put quell on, private citizens taking the law into their own hands, or am I off base?
Well, no, I mean, so that's part of it. So, like I said, deflection of what they're doing, number one. Number two, stop Trump. You make it so he's either disqualified under the 14th Amendment. That's what they kept on saying. He's engaged in insurrection, right? Then to make that true, they had to like make it true by having all these show trials and railroading us through kangaroo courts to get convictions and coerced confessions. So we were threatened with life in prison. We were charged with seditious conspiracy, which is an old holdover from the Civil War. It's an old statute. It's already got a lot of problems. It's very vague. What we call in the legal system, or lawyers call for constitutional analysis, both overbroad and vague. So it can be applied to almost any action, including free speech. That's the problem with it. And no act element, actually. There's no act element in that statute. It just says if you find that two or more persons agreed to resist with force the authority of the United States, you may find them guilty of seditious conspiracy. So going back to your point about gun ownership, anytime you hear a gun rights person saying, from my cold dead hands, and his buddy says, yeah, I agree. I'll never give my guns up. If they come from my guns, you're going to get them bullets first. And his buddy says, yeah, I agree. Boom, right there is a conspiracy to resist with force. Two guys agreed to resist with force the authority of the United States, right? So that's what they could do to you. That's what they did to us. Nothing we did was actually a crime. They criminalized our free speech. I wrote multiple open letters to President Trump. I'm a Yale Law School graduate. I applied my legal training and really wasn't, it's not rocket science. I looked at Article 2. I was like, okay, this is illegal and unconstitutional. Same analysis that John Eastman made, who was advising the president. I put those out, open letters, and I encouraged him to invoke the Insurrection Act. I said, hey, it's clear and plain that across the country, there was a conspiracy to violate the rights of the American people by disenfranchising them, by violating state election laws and installing an illegitimate usurper. That's Biden. That's what they did. You should invoke the Insurrection Act and say, under these circumstances, which with the Insurrection Act is very clear, that's what it says. Anytime the local state governments fail to protect the rights of the people, like your court system is no longer functioning properly, which it wasn't in 2020, the president can use such force and such forces as he deems necessary to protect the rights of the people. That's what the Insurrection Act, I'm paraphrasing. That's what it said. We certainly had that condition in 2020. It was open insurrection by the left all across the country, burning our cities to the ground. They were an open insurrection. The coup of 2020 was a continuation of that. That's part of the coup. All that violence in the streets was part of the coup. In fact, the reason why we're in a constitutional crisis on January the 6th is because the Supreme Court of the United States did not do their duty. They ducked their responsibility. Texas sued Pennsylvania and said, you're violating our rights under the Constitution. We're suing you. The state of Texas sued Pennsylvania. I think it's 22 other states joined the lawsuit of Texas versus Pennsylvania. Now, when one state sues another state, it's under the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. That means the Supreme Court is the trial court. You don't have to take it to a district court judge, a federal district court judge. You don't have to appeal that to an appellate court, a federal appellate court. You can go straight to the Supreme Court as a trial court. That's exactly what happened in Bush v. Gore in 2000. There was a dispute in Florida that triggered Article 2 because there was a question of whether or not they were following Florida election law. And the Supreme Court stepped in and said, here's how you're going to count these ballots under pursuant to Florida election law. And they said, therefore, therefore, Bush wins. That's what happened in 2000. The Supreme Court should have done the same thing when in this dispute in 2020. They should have got together and said, okay, what did they do? Did they violate state election law? That triggers a violation of Article 2. Now, how do we fix that? So, but instead of doing that, the Supreme Court ducked their responsibility and would not take the case. And Alito and Thomas were the only two on the court. They're saying, what are you guys doing? We have no discretion to not take this case. We're the trial court in this case under our original jurisdiction. Understand what I'm saying? It's between one state and another. We're the trial court. Now, a whistleblower inside the Supreme Court later said what happened is when they were debating this, Roberts, just Chief Justice Roberts, screamed at Alito and Thomas and said, if we do this, if we hear this case and give it to Trump, they will burn down our cities. He's like screaming at them. So I believe that's accurate. I believe that's what happened in 2020. So part of this coup, this COVID coup, I call it, is not just the setting aside of state election law and doing, wide open, unsecured drop boxes and massive mail-in ballots and all the stuff that made it easy to steal it. What is it? Biden got 16, or not Biden, I'm sorry. Yeah, Biden got 16 million more votes than Barack Obama got, right? Barack Obama got 60 million votes and 65 million. I think Hillary Clinton got 65 million votes, and now Biden all of a sudden gets what, 82 million or
Well, and they
85
all
million,
disappeared in the
something like
last
that.
election. If you remember, have you seen the graph? And it shows how in the last election, those 18 million voters disappeared, and the Democrats haven't once brought it
Yep.
up.
Yeah. Yeah. So now we're back. And then Kamala gets what, 65 million again, right? So yeah. So there's a baseline and then there's this huge blip. Oh, that's just fine. But my point is that, part of that whole smokescreen was, I believe, the terrorism of 2020 coerced the Supreme Court. That was part of their plan. And so it turned out that way. So that's what they were deflecting attention from. They pulled a coup. So they, classic projection, accused us of what they were doing and gaslighting. Oh, you're seeing this right in front of your eyes, right? Covering up the windows, not letting Republican observers close enough to do their job, all the things that they did. Wheeling in, suitcases and coolers full of whatever, unsecured, unsearched, into polling places. All that was in your face, and he told you, oh no, that's not happening. There's no election fraud. So it's massive gaslighting. But the goal was to prevent President Trump from being able to run for office again by accusing him of committing insurrection and saying that under the 14th Amendment he's disqualified. Two, put him in prison, and they tried to do that. That's why they indicted him. Unprecedented in our history to have any president indicted, either sitting or former. So they wanted to put him in prison. They wanted to make him disqualified, or smear and taint him so much and demonize him so much and demonize the broader MAGA movement and suppress the MAGA movement. That's all part of the plan too. All of that was part of what they did, terrorizing the MAGA movement, suppressing it, and hopefully they hope demonizing it and making it so that Trump can never win office again. All that failed. That's why they had to try to kill him twice. So, so what man means for evil, God will use for good. That's how I feel about that.
Well, I've spent a lot of time researching people like the spy networks of the Mossad, the CIA, and people like Jeffrey Epstein and Jean-Luc Brunel and his Canadian counterpart.
Right?
I believe that, like most of our politicians, their Supreme Court also is probably under
Oh,
blackmail and extortion.
beyond a doubt.
And that's, I believe, what happened. I don't believe
Agreed.
it's conscious. They didn't care if our country was burning down for the last 5 years. All of a sudden, I mean, it sounds like the Supreme Court justice was threatening the other judges.
Well, I'll put it this way. So another part of my open letters to President Trump was not just to invoke the Insurrection Act, it was to do a mass declassification of all the dirt. Like you said, I agree with you. Our politicians are controlled by blackmail and bribery. So quite a few of them have been compromised by blackmail or bribery, or almost all of them. And so I wanted him to go and declassify all the files held by the CIA, by the FBI, NSA, all the alphabet agencies have the dirt. That's how they control these politicians. You're right. The Five Eyes all over the world do this. That's what Epstein was doing. He was doing a blackmail operation, and it's not the only one. They're all over the world. And I've heard of other other instances like that independent of Epstein. So I'm sure you have
There are
too.
operations all over the world. One of the wealthiest families in Canada, Edgar Bronfman, Ed the founders of the Jewish National League, and their daughter, like Ghislaine Maxwell, they're from a wealthy family, and their daughter is serving time for the Nexium cult. She was running the human trafficking, and the wealthiest man in Canada was coming down and attending those. And his daughter's currently in prison. They never cover any of this, but it's all
Right.
intelligence. Part of that woman who accused Trump of paying her off or whatever, she's got the tattoo. She's a porn star. Everyone's seen the tattoo on her hip from the Nexium cult.
Oh,
And
this is what's her name? Stormy Daniels?
Stormy Daniels, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
But if you look into that cult and see any of the survivors of that cult, one of the main things, they were forced to take nude photographs so they could. This is when having a nude photograph 20 years ago would get you in trouble. Today,
Right.
that's just kind of a normal thing. But they also were being trained to blame powerful men for crimes they didn't commit. So if you really go into the Nexium cult and see how they were kind of doing the same thing where they had babies and they were changing their nanny every day so the children would, it was a lot of the MK Ultra stuff being implemented there. So these things were going on all over the world, and personally I've watched and I've seen these different people being taken down, and whether they're being extracted and returned to the countries where they're spies for, or they're really being taken down. I'm still out on that. But over
Mhm.
time, this network has been, I spent a lot of my life living overseas, so I was familiar with some of the people that maybe a lot of Americans weren't familiar with. I spent a lot of time living in Canada. All of those handlers were usually in the modeling fashion industry. They came from wealthy families. Like the
Right.
guy Jean-Luc Brunel, he mysteriously died in a French prison, high security. Again, I don't
You
believe
commit suicide?
his name was Jean-Luc Brunel. He was running the French operations for Jeffrey
Yeah.
Epstein.
I asked if he committed suicide.
Oh, yes, he committed suicide. Yes,
He
yes, in a
was,
high
yeah,
security prison.
right.
And again, I believe that they were probably extracted. One time I was watching a guy who was a former prison guard at the place that Epstein was supposedly incarcerated, and he said, those aren't numbers from that prison. Those
Hmm.
are numbers from a different prison, like the inmate numbers that you get. So I've always been, I believe there's something in the deep state intelligence. There's another layer in all those stories, I guess
Right.
would be the easiest way to explain it. You
So
know,
for someone that's skeptical, what I would say is look back at J. Edgar Hoover. So J. Edgar Hoover was the director of the FBI for life. He was there from the very beginning all the way through until he died in office. And he was a known crossdresser.
yeah,
But no one dared to even try to fire him because they all knew that he had the dirt on everybody. He had the dirt on everyone in Washington, every presidential candidate, every president, every member of Congress, all the judges. He had the dirt on everyone. This is back before electronic surveillance. This is back in the days of, file cabinets, right? And wiretaps and bugs. So that he knew who was sleeping with who and he blackmailed everybody. So that's what he did. It's historic fact. That was how he controlled people and stayed in power. Imagine what it's like now with the NSA and the power they have of total surveillance over all of us. And that's
well,
what yeah.
my
So that's
personal
what,
opinion isn't there isn't anyone in a powerful position that isn't being blackmailed by the system,
yeah,
including CEOs of major tech corporations, et cetera. I think that's how they keep a tight rope on them. And when
yeah,
someone does step out of line, their career is ruined. They
yeah,
mysteriously commit suicide. If you notice in the last few days, the one woman who was the biggest testifier, she committed
yes,
suicide supposedly, and she
yeah.
repeatedly posted that she was not suicide. She made sure her doctor knew.
She was Arkansided.
Yes. Yes. And so it's so unfortunate that woman fought for a long time. She opened my eyes. I had a friend in high school who was being trafficked, a girl I knew for years. And I didn't understand what was going on because I did know her into my 20s. But she committed suicide a few years ago.
Mm, it's too
But
bad.
yeah, but now that I know all this, it would have given me a totally different perspective. People
Right.
don't understand. I'm just a girl from a farm in Northern California. I didn't really understand all these things, although I have lived around the world. And one of the things I was going to ask you, I know that they constantly say insurrection. A lot of people don't understand that the day that we locked down for COVID, the City of London, the Bank of England, which owns all the Federal Reserves in the world, went bankrupt. And so that was the private corporation that's been in control of our country since the Civil War, through corporatocracy. And a lot of what was going on they may have felt it was an insurrection because there was a contract and they had 3 times to go bankrupt. That third time was the third bankruptcy. So they literally no longer had the power that they claim over us. And if you watch Nancy Pelosi that day, you can see that she's freaking out in her office because they've stolen 2 of her laptops. Do you remember that
Right.
story? Did you see that story?
Yeah, I remember that. Right.
Okay, so Ghislaine Maxwell's brother controls a company called the Da Vinci Company, and basically the country of Italy had given them 2 satellites to the Vatican, and that Da Vinci program was running through there. And a lot of people who are kind of in on the whole thing believe that the Vatican that's where they were running the illegal election through those 2 satellites. And if you notice, within that next few weeks, the head of the Vatican Bank and his son were arrested. Many high-level Italians were arrested and convicted. And the head of the Vatican Bank is currently in prison with his son. So those were kind of things that were going on at the exact same time as that insurrection. So the foreign corporation,
You mean the fake insurrection, the Fedsurrection.
well, right. And
Right.
I'm saying the way they see it, because we
Right.
got rid of the fake foreign corporation. So to them, it was an insurrection. For us, it was our release, our getting out from under that thumb. So had you heard anything about that? And, you
I
know,
mean, I'm not an expert on that, so I'm open-minded. I wouldn't mind learning about it, but that's
yeah.
not something that I'm really that knowledgeable about. But what I do know is I do think it's beyond a doubt that, like you said, almost all of our politicians, judges, major corporate leaders, governors are blackmailed. And so the best thing that President Trump can do, and still to this day, right now, he has absolute authority as commander in chief to declassify anything that's held in any of the files by any of the alphabet agencies. That the intelligence agencies cannot stop him. So back then, I encouraged him in open letters. I said, use SOCOM troops, use military intelligence, try to find people that you trust that are vet them as best you can, but use your military assets to go and seize the evidence of the corruption in our government, of the blackmail and the bribery, and expose it to the American people. Do a mass declassification and data dump, like WikiLeaks style. Put it out there for everyone to see. And when you do that, then we can figure out now what do we do? I'll bet you, I would say the majority of your federal judges are compromised. So yes, I think that's beyond a doubt, and I think that's what he needs to do. To this day, he should do that right now. And unless he does that, he's not going to defeat the deep state. I don't believe the path I see right now, absent that kind of massive exposure, I don't see it happening otherwise. I think that's necessary. I think it's incredibly necessary.
And I agree. I do believe he should do that. But what they did by letting in what they say 18 million people is they let a lot of subversive people into our country since that time. And I
Right.
think even saw with the recent arrest of that judge who was literally had a gang member living in
In
his
his
house,
house?
dating his
Yeah.
daughter, providing weapons. So I believe a lot of the judges were put in place over the last 20 years by
Oh,
Soros,
yeah.
deep state
Oh, beyond a doubt.
people. They brought in all, there's too many government people on the side of the people that are drug dealers and killers and gang members.
Sure.
I mean, after a while, you have to start thinking. So you kind of have to get people to change their minds because I can't, like right now, if you've ever looked at the structure that controls our lives, politicians are number 2. There's 10 levels above the politicians. So the politicians are just the face. So my personal belief, and I've watched around the world certain things happening, is that they're taking out the lower level people and they're working their way up. And I do believe something is going on. There's just too many odd things going on in different countries.
I mean, I'm hopeful.
I'm hopeful too. And I think if they went and arrested these people before they've destroyed themselves, look at the difference between people and even what they felt about the mainstream media this time last year to how many people, I've had so many people just wake up, okay, I'm done. right? So
Yeah.
the mindset of the people has changed and has
Oh,
been
it is.
shifting.
And I think, like I've heard people say, well, the American people couldn't handle the truth. I don't think that's true. And I think, like you said, that's one of the blessings that came, one of the ways that God used for good, but man used for evil, is that President Trump now is, of course, far stronger than he would have been if he had been declared a winner in 2020, which he won the election. But if that had been respected, he'd have done 4 more years. He would not be in the same posture he is now. The American people would not be as aware. We wouldn't be as resolute, and he wouldn't have as good a team as he has now. He has a much better team now than he did last time. But that being said, the deep state's game plan for him is still the same. That's
Yes.
to keep him busy, keep him distracted with foreign policy, economic policy, whatever. Keep attacking, keep him on the defensive, and then run the clock out. And that's why I believe he should push that, call it the nuclear option, whatever you want to call it. You should push that button, do that mass declassification. Imagine what it would be like if all across the web you can go and search a name of a judge and find all the dirt that was held about him by the FBI and the CIA to control him and the NSA. And it was all right there for everyone to see. Videotape, pictures, whatever it is, you know, documents of all the money he took. I mean, imagine, look at what Elon Musk did with when he bought Twitter. That's an example, right? He bought Twitter and he exposed all the dirt from inside of Twitter, all the internal emails and chat groups and working groups where they were working with CIA, FBI, and all right there inside of their working groups were current serving CIA in domestic operations and FBI agents. He
Why do you
exposed
think
all
Hunter
that.
Biden's never been arrested?
Right.
I
So he
did a deep
exposed.
dive into him. He's so CIA, I don't even know how to start.
Right. So my point is that what Elon Musk did with Twitter is what needs to be done in every agency. And Doge is doing some of that, but it needs to be all of it. Like when Kash Patel and Bongino took over the FBI, they should have thrown the doors open unless it's actual critical operational security for a current operation like overseas or someone's life's in danger. Everything else should have been shown to all of us. Start with the J6 prosecutions. Show all the internal emails and discussions and chat of them talking about how they're going to set us up and go after us. It's easy to find all that. It's all in there. So that's what should happen. I hope that's what happens. It hasn't happened yet. And like I said, I really believe that's a massive piece of the puzzle. It's like half of the battle right there, exposure. The
Well, and
truth will set us free.
right now, the whole world is blaming Trump for the collapse of China and all these things. These countries, our politicians have been lying to all of us for years. And they're what's really gone on is there's an international financial collapse. As I said, the city of London, where the Bank of England owns all the Federal Reserve banks in the world, it went bankrupt the day we locked down for COVID. So that
Mm.
means all the banks in the world. So every country, that's why we've been printing all this money. 90% of the money we print for foreign wars and foreign aid stays in the country to buy food, supplies, military, industrial complex. Otherwise, our banks would not be liquid right now. You can go yourself and look at the Federal Reserve. Our banks are no longer required to have any reserves. And we're insuring $37 trillion with $1.5 billion that's in the FDIC. So the
Right.
reality is there's a lot more going on. We have to see what's going on. The whole world is blaming Trump for their economies to collapsing. Our governments have been lying to us for 4 years, and now we're watching it play out. We have been at war with China for several years. I cover this extensively on my channel. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think,
They call it unrestricted warfare.
yes.
And the coup of 2020 was part of that. COVID was part of that. I mean, you know all this. I'm preaching to the choir
And
with you.
and who was, where is the Dominion? Like I spent a lot of my life in Canada, have many close friends, worked there, was married to a Canadian. But a lot of the crimes committed against the United States are committed by Canada because they're part of the British Crown. The British Crown, again, is the City of London. They're ruled by the Queen, quote, who's not in control. The City of London controls the British Empire. And they've had Chinese troops. They built underground bases all along our border. They were training Chinese troops. The military in Canada was forced to train Chinese troops in modern warfare. And the Chinese have always had a plan to come over the north of Canada into the United States. They had Chinese troops training in China. And I believe that Canada has already been overthrown by the Communist Party because communism is all the communist movements in the world were financed by the City of London and Wall Street. So we have to tie all of these things together. We are under attack. Everybody in
And that
the
ties in
world
with what you
is
said.
what,
That's what ties in with what you said earlier about we have a bunch of like millions of proxies
yes,
of China in the United States. Like all the gangs, all the cartels, those are proxies. And you have military aged males from China that have come here illegally, tens
yes.
of thousands of them. I mean, those are soldiers. Those aren't just guys that want freedom. Come on. They've been sent here for a reason. So that's the thing is that we need to realize the reality. Like you said, China's been waging war against us for years, for decades actually. And they've been getting ready for what they consider to be the final conquest of the United States. Now, on our side, what we have is we have a MAGA base and growing number of Americans who are awake and aware and are now, almost immune to any of their propaganda. It's like you said, there's a great awakening happening. So what we need to do is we need to put a monkey wrench in their plans and have our own reset for ourselves. That's what we need. Like I think we should have a jubilee. I didn't incur any of that debt. You didn't incur any of that debt. So why do we want to say that our children and grandchildren are going to owe trillions of dollars to who? To international bankers in China? Forget it. So
Well, you're
my
a
two
Yale
cents.
graduate. Do you know how communism was brought to China?
You mean Mao? What do you mean?
Yes. Who brought communism to China?
I don't know. Tell me.
Yale in China via George Bush Sr.'s first cousin.
Oh,
And
really? Huh?
they were the ones who financed the communists. So it's a full loop back to this same dangerous group of people. Everyone knows George Bush Sr. was one of the
Skull
largest
and Bones
heroin
guy.
dealers in the world, right? He
Sure.
created Bill Clinton doing all the drugs through Arkansas and the Mena airport. So when you trace these atrocities and these power structures, Yale was created by the guy who created Yale was a slave owner to teach people. He was a school for the
I thought
slave
it
owners'
started. I
children.
thought it started off as a like Harvard. I thought it started off as a religious school, wasn't it?
Well, it may have been a religious. There was a lot of French Catholics that were practicing religion but still owned slaves. So the founder of Yale himself was a slave owner, and he founded Yale for the children of the slave owners. I think that's been,
Huh.
and not to say it's not a great school and that's what's going on today, but that was the
It
original.
was it was all right, but here's the thing about Yale. So I went to Yale Law School, and out of the gate, the dean of the law school, first day, gave a big speech to us, and he bragged about how he said this one square block is one of the most influential blocks of buildings in the world because we have Yale graduates all over the globe in high positions in government and finance, et cetera, and business, et cetera. So he bragged about their influence all over the world. They got their tentacles all over the place. So when I was in Yale Law School, a lot of times it was like that movie, The Devil's Advocate, where the devil's, a lawyer. Remember that?
Yes, I love that
You got
movie.
you got Keanu Reeves. I thought when I'm walking down the hall, I can feel like the evil oozing out of the walls. It's like the devil's advocate. Because the devil's like, Al Pacino's the devil. He's like, yeah, we're in the law because the law's in everything. Of course. Of course the devil's going to be in the law because the law is in everything. And that's certainly true.
Well,
So
they're teaching the high levels of society to continue the Admiralty Law birth certificate, where they own our birth certificates and trade us like animals. We all live under that system. So you're being trained at Yale to maintain that system.
so why not just reject that, like I said, and have a jubilee and say we don't owe anything to anybody. No
Well,
one
we had a
owns us.
contract with the British Crown, and they had the right to go bankruptcy
I
three.
don't have a contract with the British Crown.
Well, it was illegal during the Civil War. The wartime people, they went out, Lincoln let them go out on a boat. They voted the Federal Reserve in. A lot of people think it was 1913, but it was originally the Secret Service was originally to go around and seize all the gold and silver anybody had left after the Civil War and tell them it was fake and give them paper money and tell them they could go to the bank anytime they wanted and get their gold. And that's what caused the crash of 29 because the foreign bankers stole all the gold. And when they went to the bank, there was no gold. And then we got in when our government had nothing left to pledge. They repledged us into the birth certificate Roman system, the Babylonian Masonic system that's kept power over the world for the last 3,000 years. And our ancestors escaped that. And it took them 150, almost 200 years to get us back into the system.
So how do you get out from under that? What's your answer to that?
Well, technically, our contract with the British Crown, when Bill Clinton was president, our country went bankrupt for the third time in 1999, and there was 90 days for them to. Our country was what they call open for capture, and then one of the reasons that Bill Clinton was in place is because he was a Rhodes Scholar, Cecil Rhodes. You're familiar with the name. But Cecil Rhodes left his fortune after murdering and capturing illegally Africa and slaughtering who knows how many people and took the gold and diamond resources
Yeah, he
back.
created the round table, right?
Yes. And so he left all of his money for future leaders to work to bring people back into the British Commonwealth. So it once again be the Roman superpower of the world, because really the British family is really owned by the Vatican. They gave up their rights at the Concordance of Worms in 1122, and they've basically been spearheads since that time. So this is what's been going on for a long time. And because our country went bankrupt, our country was open for capture. There was some private citizens who stepped in, who understood what was going on, and they saved our flag and re-registered our flag. That's why we're not part of the British Commonwealth today. And I love Canadians, I love Canada, but they again are under the British crown. The British invaded China and started two wars, addicted half their population to opium and heroin so they could take over China and open up the trade routes. And they eventually ended up with control of all of the Chinese money since about the 1800s. So they still to this day own and control all the banks in China, just like all the banks in the United States are controlled by this same power structure. So
So what's your answer?
we have to kick out the Federal Reserve System and their fiat currency. It's an illegal. They're criminals, and they have no right to rule over us. So this is
Oh, I
what's
agree with
being,
that. Yeah, the
yeah.
Federal Reserve from day one, it's neither federal nor a reserve. It's a private bunch of bankers, right?
Yes,
It's
it's
a,
a
it's a
private
private.
foreign group of bankers, which against our Constitution, but they replaced our real Constitution um, at some point, and they replaced it with the corporate Constitution now. And you can, if you remember when Trump was first president, he went to England and he viewed the original Constitution that had been stolen by the Canadians and the
I
British in
thought
the
the I
War of
thought the original
1812.
Constitution is in the archives in Washington D.C.,
Well,
isn't it?
there's two constitutions. There's the original one, and the British thought they had destroyed a lot of the original ones. But I saw Trump take the tour, and he viewed the original constitution when he confronted the British royal family. If you've noticed, since although he's very kind to them on the surface, if you understand protocol, I spent a lot of time in international business in government situations, and when Trump first became president and he went to England, he was aware of this bankruptcy and aware of the true structure. And if you watch his visit with the King and Queen, Melania and Donald Trump walk in front of the Queen. So that shows who has the power. He next went to Saudi Arabia, and they gave him the same dance they would give the king. And right after that, all those top level Saudi people resigned. And many of them died mysterious deaths, either in hunting accidents or they had heart attacks. So there's definitely something going on, whether it's just one side fighting with another in these power structures, or those structures are truly being taken down, and it's been a slow process. So I watch a lot of this international stuff, and I just don't listen to what they're saying. I listen to where they're standing, how they're looking, what they're doing, who's addressing each other, because we live in a very relaxed society, and other cultures, things are very fixed. And there's
Right.
never a time in history that anyone ever walked in front of the King and Queen of England. And if you've noticed, their whole family's in disarray now and they're pretty much crashing. So,
Hmm. Interesting.
yeah, so that kind of got off the topic. I wanted to ask you a little bit. I mean, you went to Yale, you were
Right.
in the Supreme
Well,
Court.
Yale Law School, not the undergrad.
Right.
So no, I was not Skull and Bones. That's undergrad only.
No, oh no,
Just so
no,
you
I
know.
wasn't going to say that. I was saying, on a personal level, like, were you married? Did you have children? Did this affect you? I mean, what
Yes.
happened to your mother? Let's
Yeah.
get a little
I
personal
was
story.
yeah, I was married. I have 6 kids. I'm divorced now. But yes, at the time I had children. Yes.
Okay, and were you divorced then or
No,
no?
no.
So you lost your,
After after that. Yeah.
now were you, I mean, these are personal questions, so you just
Yeah.
enter
So
any
yes, I'm
information.
now divorced and I have 6 kids.
You have
Yes.
6 kids. And do
Yeah.
they still live in Texas? I think you're from.
No, they're in Montana.
Hmm.
I'm in Texas. They're in Montana.
Okay. All right. Well, that must have been really hard. And I mean, your education, all those years.
So here's the bottom line with me is I could have, if I wanted to, I could have had it's a golden ticket. You're a Yale Law School graduate. It's a golden ticket to wealth and political power. I
Yes.
could have worked for some big law firm in Dallas, for example, where I'm at now. I could have done that back then. Instead, I went to small town Montana and became a defense attorney, criminal defense. I could have gone into GOP, traditional establishment GOP politics. I'd probably be a U.S. senator right now. But my oath comes first. And so I threw all that away and focused on the mission of doing what I can to defeat the deep state and defend our Constitution, what's left of it. And, waking the veterans up and organizing, hopefully organizing the men of this country to take their responsibilities seriously. That's my mission now. I'm not sure how that's going to look going forward. Right now, I'm the national spokesman for Condemned USA. So started by another J6er, Trennis Evans here in Texas. And so I'm working with him as their national spokesman. They helped me when I was a Gulag prisoner, and now we're now helping others, including and the other. It's not just now that J6 is over with, quote unquote over with. There's still political prisoners in this country. Look at Tina Peters in Colorado, the election whistleblower. She was railroaded. Same kind of thing we went through in D.C. Never gonna get a fair trial in Washington, D.C. if you're a Trump supporter. Same goes for a Trump supporter in Denver, sadly. So
Right.
anywhere the Democrats are in power or the deep state, they're going to put you in prison. So there are still political prisoners in this country, and so I encourage your listeners to support Condemned USA and the work that we do to try to help these people. But beyond that, my goal is still the same. I need to wake the veterans up and organize the men of this country, and that's my mission. So going forward, we'll see how that looks. But some version of Oath Keepers 2.0 is coming, just so you know.
Okay. So it's dissolved now.
Well, it's not yes and no. So there's still Oath Keepers out there, but the organization as it stood as a nonprofit, fell apart after I was arrested. The man that was my vice president, really awesome, retired Army colonel, he sadly had 2 strokes. He had two serious strokes and wasn't able to maintain the helm and it kind of fell apart. But in the other, like you said earlier, what happens to people around you? The sad reality is that, and police states know this is why they do it. When they persecute and start a terror campaign. That's what J6 turned into. After J6, it was a terror campaign against all of MAGA. And they did their very best to demonize not just those of us who'd been there at J6, but all of MAGA, right? So you had Barack, I keep saying Barack Obama. It was really the third Obama administration, actually. But yeah, you had Biden calling the MAGA movement, calling us fascist and racist and a threat to democracy and the greatest threat to democracy in our history, et cetera. So you have this open demonization and suppression of the MAGA movement. And sadly, a lot of people succumb to it. They they faded back into the woodwork. They hunkered down and kept their head low. They were afraid to speak out. They say self-censored. So when I was arrested, a bunch of people that I know took any photos of me and them off their Facebook pages.
Right.
My friend that I'm with here in Dallas, Kristen was not one of those. She was a good friend of mine from Michigan who um, insisted on leaving up a picture of me and her together all through the entire time. So to her credit. But a lot of other people, including a lot of men that I thought were solid, just completely, flaked and just ran and hid, basically. So this is just human nature. The deep state knows it. It's the same thing, the same playbook as any other dictatorship in world history. You can go read 1984 by Orwell when he was talking about what he had seen in the Soviet Union is reflected in his book. It was done in Nazi Germany. It's been done by every dictatorship around the world. Secret police come knocking and carry you away. Then they go to your neighbors, and your neighbors disavow you. Your own family will disavow you.
Right.
So there's a really good book out right now by a girl that was an escapee from North Korea. I forgot the name of it. I think it's called Time Remains.
Oh,
But
is she always wear really beautiful evening gowns when she talks?
I think so.
She
Yes.
was kept
Yeah.
prisoner by Chinese as a sex slave.
Yes. That's right.
Yes, I've seen that
Yes.
girl. She's
She
got
was
some
sex trafficked.
amazing.
Yeah, so she came to the United States and went to Colombia, and then she's like, Colombia is actually worse than North Korea in some ways. She said, like, when I listened to one interview she gave, she said, in North Korea, men are still men and women are still women. And at Colombia, she was conditioned to believe that, 2 + 2 = 5. That, oh no, we can't tell you what a woman is. We can't tell you what a man is. She said, it's a far worse than it is in North Korea. The brainwashing on the Columbia's campus was far worse. The Marxist brainwashing. But she experienced a situation where she had family members who went on television in North Korea and disavowed her and
Of
attacked her.
course.
And I've had that sad experience with my ex-wife and my oldest son, unfortunately.
No.
Sadly. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Same
really
kind of same kind
sad.
of thing. So look, the bad guys, same playbook around the world. The bad guys will use fear and intimidation and terrorism against you to suppress you if you let them. But if you don't let them and you refuse, like Solzhenitsyn said, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, the famous Russian dissident who spent 10 years in the Gulag, he wrote a really awesome essay called Live Not by Lies. You can find it for free on the internet. It's only 2 pages long. But he says essentially that this is how dictatorships work. They are always lie factories. They work on lies. And the way to defeat them is truth. Refuse to participate in a lie. So if you're in a meeting and lies are being spewed, walk out of the meeting. Don't repeat a lie. So that's a first step of resistance is live not by lies. But the second step is to speak out, speak the truth about what you know is happening. And that's where that's what we saw with COVID and then the aftermath of J6 is a suppression. And you had people who were voluntarily self-censoring, right? They wouldn't talk about COVID. If they questioned the shots or wouldn't take the shots, they wouldn't talk about it. They would keep it under their hat. If they had questions about the election, they wouldn't talk about it. They're afraid of being demonized. The Chinese system of social credit score is already here. It's being used against us. I was completely deplatformed in 2020. Oath Keepers was deplatformed off of Facebook. We had 500,000 followers on our main Facebook page. Overnight, poof, it was gone. All of our state pages, all our local pages, we had hundreds of pages, all gone in one fell swoop. Same on Twitter, same thing. Just a night of the long knives of purging. And that happened to a lot of groups on the political right. Mailchimp, Teespring, HostGator, all these different organizations or systems we used even Discord. We tried to get a chat group on Discord, and they shut us down. So you're just completely deplatformed, debanked. Bank of America shut down our bank accounts overnight. Also, so this is what happened. And so look at that, and they go, okay, I'm afraid to lose my job. I'm afraid to lose my bank account. I don't want to be deplatformed because they know what's being done to others, and so they sit down and shut up. So that's what happened. So a lot of people that I knew that I thought were rock solid, ride or die brothers, ghosted, wouldn't answer their phones, didn't lift a finger to
Right.
support me or help me while I was in prison. Yeah.
Well, and we were
That's
talking.
just, but that's just human nature though. That's human nature.
Well, people have families and children and things, and they may have crimes under their belt that they're also hiding, once you dig into what people have actually got going on in their world.
I think it's mostly just that mundane
Fear.
fear of, like, look at your average police officer. During COVID, all across the country, we saw cops enforcing the most ridiculous edicts that weren't even law,
Hmm.
just by fiat, just pronouncements by the governor or by some judge in a county judge in Texas, whatever. We saw it all across the country. Not all of them would obey it, but most of them did. Most of them went along because they're afraid of losing their job. They're afraid of losing their pension. They're afraid of losing their ability to pay their mortgage, etc. So they just go along, just like it happened in Germany. Same thing. It's human nature.
Well, a lot of people, we were talking about Elon Musk a little bit. I think the insanity that people are going crazy over Elon Musk is because you were mentioning how the left always has all these legal funds and everything.
Oh
What,
yeah,
you think that they're
yeah.
getting them from the hippies protesting on the street?
In
We're
short,
getting it from us.
this was
They were
frustrating
probably
for me.
getting it through
Why?
NGOs.
Yeah, well, and deep pockets on the political left. They will take care of each other. They do. They will if they get arrested for protesting or trying to burn down a federal courthouse, for example, in Portland, they will get lawyers that are paid for. Deep pockets will step up and fund their legal defense. On our side, no. I mean, Cindy Powell, to her credit, paid for my defense attorneys from Texas. So she did that. Her organization did step up. But outside of that, all kinds of groups we contacted trying to get assistance on the political right, and they wouldn't touch us with a 10-foot pole. Oh, we don't take those kinds of cases. So that's why Condemned USA was created, because we do take those kinds of cases. We don't shy away from people that are being attacked and demonized.
And are
So, but
you
that's the problem.
solely donated money, or do you have law firms that contribute, or how does that work?
Well, we no, it's almost always mom and pop donations.
Hmm.
And then it's almost always just individual lawyers that we know that where we locate in each state that want to help. Big law firms, crickets,
Yeah.
ghosts. They're not, no. They'll show up at some big Reagan dinner and get an award for some philanthropy thing they did or pro bono work they did for some, whatever it might be, some kind of charity or something. But they won't help political prisoners. No. The political right is horrible about helping political
Well,
prisoners.
they
Just
they
telling
serve the Bar Association, which is the British Admiralty located in the city of London. It's not an
I
American.
never used that as an excuse. When I was an
Well,
attorney, I
I'm
never
just
did that.
saying they don't serve the American people. We think that courts are foreign hostile ports, and our lawyers work for the British Admiralty under the Bar Association, and that's the Admiralty law that
So
owns
why so,
certificates.
so why do the Democrat lawyers step up and provide free legal counsel and deep pockets pay for it for all the lefties who are
Because
burning stuff in
they're
the streets?
the goal of most of our corporate CEOs in that is to bring about the slave system. It works for them. They're at the top. So a lot of these,
So we have wealthy people on the political right. We have millionaires and billionaires. I know some of them here in Texas. I know some actual millionaires and billionaires here in Texas. I never saw donations from them for legal defense for any of us J6ers. And I'm not trying to be too bitter. I'm just pointing out a reality.
right,
Our side does not take care of our political prisoners like their side does.
right. Oh, and
It's
I
almost
agree.
always mom and pa sending in $100, $200, whatever they can afford, just scraping by. That's what we see. That's what I saw. That's reality, with very few exceptions. City Powell was one exception. I got to give her props. But she
Well,
lost, and her fight against them destroyed her. It really did. So,
there's kind of a lady that's working for the White House now, and she looks and sounds a lot like Cindy Powell, but that's not her, is it?
which one?
I don't know. I've seen a lady doing she's in charge of one of the divisions. I didn't catch who it was, but she
I'm not
looks,
sure.
sounds like Cindy Powell. And I was like, I didn't think she was back in office. Maybe they're just from the same state and they kind of have a similar accent or something.
Right.
We were talking a little bit earlier that you have a book coming out. Do you want to tell us a little bit about
Well,
that?
so yeah, I'm writing a book. My co-author is Mel Hawley, who has been covering a lot of J6. She was there, but did not get arrested. She was on the outside of the Capitol. But she's interviewed, I think, probably more than anybody else, maybe with the exception of Dave Summerall. She's interviewed, tons of J6ers or Cowboy Logic. Cowboy Logic, Dave Summerall, and then Mel, probably number three, right there with them. So she knows a lot of the J6ers, and so she's helping me write that book. We're co-authors in it. So I'm not sure when it'll be finished. It's just, I'm juggling a lot of different balls in the air. But yes, we're as fast as we can. We're working on that book right now, and
Okay.
hopefully that'll be out soon.
Do you have
But
a working title that we could just keep in mind if we want to
I
keep a eye out for it?
I'm kind of thinking maybe this one right here. I might make it that one, which is Oath Kept.
Oath kept. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good name. Okay. I'm
So
gonna put
I'm
that
thinking
down
about
in
that
here.
one.
I'll type that in so I've got it for the.
I might. I'm not sure yet, but so
Okay.
I'll still want to talk to Mel about it. But I think I might make that the title.
It's
Oath
called a
Kept.
working title.
Yes, that's right.
in the
Working title.
business, right? And you can always change it when someone else has your name already,
There you
which
go.
sometimes happens. All right. Well, is there anything else that you wanted to share with us or any words of inspiration? Anybody you want to make
Well,
a shout out
I
to?
mean, the big point I want to make is that, like I said, a man means for evil, God will use for good. I think that because they tried to crush President Trump and then tried to kill him and tried to crush us, all they did is made him stronger. And same for us. I mean, it was, I spent over a year in solitary. So I want to make very clear about that. So what happened with that is they would hold us in solitary confinement and having to a lot of Oath Keepers and Proud Boys and other people too. The whole point of that is to coerce you into a false confession. And this goes back to the corruption in our legal system. You know you're innocent. Your defense attorney knows you're innocent. The prosecutor knows you're innocent. They just don't care. They're going to coerce you, put you in solitary. So you're being put in solitary before you're even tried. It's pretrial detention. So, like, I was arrested January 13th, 2022. It's been over a year since J6. I was in Texas. I hadn't gone anywhere. I hadn't left the country. I hadn't attacked anyone. I hadn't committed any acts of violence. And yet they still said, oh, he's too dangerous to leave out free walking around pre-trial. He needs to be locked away. So that was locked away. This was done by a magistrate who was supposedly a conservative. Kimberly Priest Johnson was a federal magistrate here in Texas. She denied me pretrial release first. And then we appealed that to the district court judge in DC. But of course, Judge Mehta, radical leftist, he denied me pretrial release also. And my priors were speeding tickets. That's it. And all my entire life, never been arrested for anything or charged with any crime, just speeding tickets. But yet, I was denied pretrial release. So the presumption of innocence is dead in this country. Dead. Just want you to understand that. If they, you won't even know you're being indicted because the grand jury process doesn't include you. You don't even know it's happening. The prosecutors get to go lie to the grand jury. Like that's what the old saying is: a grand jury will indict a ham sandwich. They'll say whatever they want to the grand jury. The grand jury is going to indict you. Once you're indicted, you're on that conveyor belt that leads to prison. And the only way, practically, especially in the federal system, for you to get off that conveyor belt is to plead guilty to a crime you did not commit, to admit your guilt and sign a confession. So they coerce you. That's why solitary is done, to break your spirit, coerce you. So they coerce you into signing on to something you know you did not do. We had two oath keepers that pled guilty to seditious conspiracy, and they said yes, we committed. There was a conspiracy to attack the Capitol. Then they signed on to a stack of lies, written statement that I had planned since November of 2020 to attack the Capitol. Total lies. But they signed on to it because their lawyers talked them into it. So, like I was saying, everyone in the process knows you're innocent, but this is what they do. The judge knows it too. Like Judge Mehta used to be a defense attorney. He knows. He's had plenty of clients in his past who were innocent and took a plea deal, something they did not do. And when you sign a plea agreement, you say, I am saying that I did this because it is in fact true. And then they have them sign a statement that says, and I have not been coerced in any way. It's completely a lie. Everyone's being coerced. Every plea bargain is being coerced. But with 30 years, like President Trump said in his Meet the Press interview, I know the system. He knows it by now. He says it's a nasty system. A guy has told you that 30 years or take 2 years. And of course, they take the 2 years. That's the reality. So it's a broken system. It's a corrupt system. It violates the laws against perjury are being violated every day. Subordination of perjury and conspiracy to commit perjury are being carried out in courtrooms across this country every day, all over the place. And of course, it's the sin of bearing false witness is being committed. I would not do that. And my co-defendants would not do that. But there are some people who did. And the problem with doing that is you further the false narrative. Again, live not by lies. When you sign on to what you know is a lie, they will take that, and they did, to the media and say, oh, look, see, two more of them have confessed that there was a conspiracy. And the whole point was to build this big fake conspiracy and stick President Trump right on top like a cherry. He's the kingpin. That's what they wanted guys to do is turn on. That's what I could have done. I could have gone home. I could have gone home within hours if I'd have signed a false confession and then said that President Trump told me to attack the Capitol. I could have done that and I would have gone home. The guys that pled out, the Oath Keepers who did take that deal, didn't see a day in prison. They got probation only. And the sick thing is that when President Trump came into office, he pardoned them. But those of us who stayed strong, went to trial, got commuted only. I don't understand why that happened. So we were set free. Our prison term was ended, but I'm still a felon. I'm still technically a felon. I've had all my disability rights from the VA taken from me. The VA sent me a nasty letter saying that because I was convicted of seditious conspiracy, which is the same as treason, basically, they say that I can no longer be buried in a veteran cemetery. So all of us that are veterans, and I know Joe Biggs in the same position, Dominic Pizzola, a bunch of us are veterans. Kenny Harrelson, one other oath keeper. We've all lost our disability and our benefits from being veterans because of this taint. So we need full pardons. I don't blame President Trump for that. Someone in his circle, this is the problem, is that he still has people around him who are not as resolute and not as principled as he is. That's what I'm concerned about. And I think that's a concern that is valid based on our experience from last time and also some of the things we're seeing now. I'm worried and concerned that he has a better team, but he still has people around him that are giving him bad advice. And so, in closing, I still believe there's 12, yeah, 12 of us left who got commutations who still need a pardon. We need our rights fully restored. I've always carried, since all my entire adult life, I've carried a gun responsibly and safely to protect myself and those around me. And now I can't do that anymore. So,
So
need
I
my
guess
rights
you're a
restored.
big proponent of judiciary and prison reform,
Oh, absolutely. Our prison system's horrible.
to
I mean,
say
we,
the
we,
least.
we could do, I'll come back on some time. Let's just do one whole show about that,
Okay.
about what I saw in the prison system, how broken it is, and what needs to be done to fix it. I've got a lot to say about that. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Is there a somewhere address someone could get your email, or how did people contact you if they wanted to reach out?
So I'm back on Facebook finally. I was suspended when I first opened up my Facebook page. I hadn't even posted anything. I was suspended, but I'm on Facebook. I believe my Facebook is just simply, what is my Facebook? I think it's just Real Stewart Rhodes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm on Rumble as I haven't done anything with Rumble yet. I'm going to start pretty soon though. So I'm on Rumble as Real Stewart Rhodes. I have a Substack. I think that's at stewartrhodes.substack.com. I think is what it is. I'm sorry. I'll send you the links. But
Okay, yeah, I'll put everything in the bottom,
yeah,
including your book title. And I know that you're also raising money to support your efforts, and I'll put that link in the bottom too.
you bet. I've got a
All
good
right,
send
and
go
we'll,
up.
we'll air in a few days. I think I've got you
Okay,
scheduled for next
but
Tuesday or Thursday.
let's do that. I'll come back and let's talk about prison reform.
Okay, I
That'd be
would
a
really
really good
like that.
topic. Yes,
I,
that'd be fantastic.
I
Oh,
actually
not just
employ.
so prison reform and so prison. So let's call it the prison industrial complex reform. Prison, the courts, prosecutors, police, all that ties together. All of it ties together. All the things that need to be fixed. It's pretty bad.
I myself hire part-time labor because I have a job. So over the years, I've hired ex-cons, not bad ones, people who made mistakes when they were younger, but they've been through the prison system. And I've really heard a lot of different things. And especially if you're poor, you really don't have a chance, even if you didn't
No.
do it, like you said. And then you
Mhm.
can turn around and sue them for false imprisonment. So if they get you to say you did it, then that relieves them from whatever they
That's
were.
right.
You're
Yep.
dating you're a poor kid dating the sheriff's daughter and he doesn't want that. Or I've also employed people who've committed serious crimes and they found God in prison and they got straight, and they're
Yep.
excellent employees. They're always on time. They're very, I'm not saying that, I know prison has a place. I'm not going to be hiring, rapists, for instance,
Right.
because that's an incurable thing, or a pedophile, the same thing.
Yeah.
But there are people, especially young men, who make mistakes when they're young and they've
Right.
worked their whole life for it. And I
And,
think,
that's the big thing is what I saw in prison. So I did see innocent men who should not have been there. And I can give you several of those when we talk again. Some really, really awful examples of that. But I also know that there were guys that are like, yeah, I was a drug dealer. I grew up in an inner city ghetto, and that's the only way out. In
you're
their
right.
head, that's the only way to make money. So what prisons should be doing, I think they should be taking those guys and putting them in the military. I really do. Just bring back federal parole. If you're worried about them doing something stupid while they're, off base, put them on an aircraft carrier. Put them out in the middle, put them on a submarine, put them out in the middle of the ocean. Give them a trade, give them some self-respect, put them in a positive warrior culture. Because
Yeah.
gangs are warrior cultures, but they're a perversion of a warrior culture. It's a warrior culture that's self-destructive and destroys their own community. We'll put them and they respect military service. And a lot of them find out, like, oh, I used to be a paratrooper. Oh, that's really cool. They respect that. So And they would say, "Oh man, I wish I could have done that." Now, as a felon, they can't join the military. So I know I'm going to probably disagree with a lot of conservatives about this, but man, if you're a Christian and you believe in redemption, then you can't say that young man, when he gets out of prison at 25 or 26 years of age, now is suddenly, he's evil for life. You can no, you got to throw him in the trash can. You can't do that to him. You got to give him a way out. And I think the best way out of the military. That's what we used to do with guys, right? You go to the
Well,
Marine Corps,
or
you go to
like,
the Army.
prisons now, they're kind of working out, they're doing stuff. You need to re-educate them. You need to teach them how to work on cars, teach them how to do something.
Right.
A lot of people in prison are poor. They didn't have a father. There
They
are
need a trade.
recurring
Yeah.
types. And so they had no other example, but the other thugs and criminals, probably their moms were dating or their uncles were, or men's brains don't even finish growing until they're about 28. Women's grow a little faster, but
That's true.
that's true. Your physical
So,
mental maturity really doesn't occur
but
until
you're right.
men, it's
You're,
26 to 28. For women, it's like 23 to 25. Maybe it depends on what culture. People are maturing a little bit faster, in some Latin cultures.
yeah, but
The
they're like you
girls
said,
look a
they're
little older than, European girls. They just mature a little quicker. So
right.
it's the
But like you said, who are their mentors? What's their role model for manhood? Unless
P.
they're
Diddy,
unless they're
Jay-Z.
right. So unless
That-
they're a sports star, like they can get in the NFL or the NBA, or unless they are a rapper. That's a lot of them all these guys in prison are delusional. They think they're going to be the next big rapper or something. Only a tiny fraction ever going to be successful doing any of that. And so they wind up when they get out. So what else is there? It's being a pimp or being a drug dealer, making money on the street, or robbing people. And I was a GED tutor and an adult English instructor, and I was also a suicide watch companion. So I kept pretty busy in prison. But I
well, that
talked to these
kept your mind
guys.
busy.
Well, keep my mind busy, and also I wanted to have a spirit of service.
Hmm.
I thought that was important. So, but I talked to these guys, and what are they going to go back to? Their only way of making money is doing what they used to do in the streets. In the street culture, it's destructive. In that street culture, it's okay to rob people. It's okay to shoot people. It's okay to do what you got to do to get yours, that kind of thing. And that's the standard that's being set for these guys. That's it. That's all they have. So if you want to break that cycle and give them something else, I think the military is the best way to do it. But certainly, if you're not going to do that, then yes, give them a trade school, teach them how to weld, teach them how to become an electrician, teach them, like you said,
Well, I'm
work on
thinking of
cars.
doing that while they're in prison so they can build self-confidence, so they can
Yeah, sure,
build, so
absolutely.
they can
But
learn together, they can meet
but
other
frankly,
people that want to reform.
I would sentence them to the Marine Corps.
Mhm.
Your sentence for being a drug dealer is you're going to do 4 years in the Marine Corps. And in the Marine Corps, we're gonna keep a thumb on your back of your neck, watching everything you do. And if you get out of line, you're gonna go to the brig or whatever you do to them to
Right.
discipline them.
Right.
But at least now they're in a warrior culture with other men they respect. That's huge. Okay, that's important.
And they have a
And
purpose and a paycheck and they have benefits and
it
they have a way
steers
to
that.
redeem themselves, because
Yep,
once you're marked as a bad kid, that follows you your whole life.
yep.
Said to a few people, because they're like, oh, well, we don't like that relative. I'm like, so are we judging everybody we're related to now based on what they did when they were 17 and their parents were getting divorced and blah, 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 blah? He's 30-year-old
Right.
person now, or she's a 30. And some people don't change. And you can't recruit everyone, but especially for petty crimes and crimes from people from poor areas.
Or nonviolent crimes.
That's what I
You
mean.
know. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Because
So yeah.
I'm not, I think I'm opposed to the death penalty personally, because I'm a Christian. I don't believe in abortion. I don't believe in the death penalty. So do not kill. So, but I believe those people should be in prison their whole lives with no parole. I don't think they should get out. I just don't believe.
Well, I think someone that's like these rapists they've been caught, raping and murdering American women that are from foreign country. I don't want to spend money on them,
Well,
you
I
know.
see that, but the reality
So
is
I'm all
just
about
like
putting a
you were
bullet in their
thrown
head.
in prison for something you didn't do. There's
Well,
people that
sure,
have been thrown in prison for things they didn't do.
that's true. And there's the Innocence Project, and they found a lot of guys that were railroaded and blamed for murders they did not commit. So that's true.
Exactly. So that's my point. These death penalty cases, in college, I did a paper on it, and it's costing per prisoner. Everyone I debated the cost of money. Who's making all the money from these death penalty cases is the lawyers.
Oh yeah.
They're
Well,
making it costs the state like $1.5 million to $3 million per appeal, and that's when I was in college way back when. So I can't imagine what it is right now. It's
fair
another
point.
way to milk the system.
And that's another topic for next time we talk. But
Okay.
the lawyers in this country bear a lot of responsibility for why things are so screwed up. They are repeat players in a system that, like that conveyor belt I was talking about. They're the workers along the side of the conveyor belt, keeping each widget going along the conveyor belt. Putting squirting some oil on them or tweaking this or that. But they all know where they're going to wind up. They're all going into the system. They're all going into prison. Most of the lawyers don't care about their clients. They don't give a they just don't care.
Right.
It's
Because
just
they all
they
guys
go home to their
went
big
to
nice
law
fancy
school.
house. What's that?
I said they're all guys that went to law school and always looked down on the poor kids that were over,
Right. Well, and also, no skin off their nose. They're going to go home to their nice house and their nice little car, their fancy car. At the end of the day,
Mhm.
you're just another one. You're just another guy in the process. And almost all of them are juggling like 20, 30 cases at a time.
Right, of
Yeah,
course. Yeah.
making
I,
money.
I was on the business side. I worked in public companies, so I spent a lot of my life with litigators and SEC attorneys. And
Right.
of course, every one of those law firms, big law firms, also has a criminal attorney in there because they don't advertise it, but there's always a few criminal attorneys in a big
Right.
SEC firm because
Right.
your clients aren't getting needing representation because they were angels. So
Right.
okay. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all this. And I think it's really going to open some people's eyes. I've enjoyed watching your other interviews. And so I'm just going to sign off right now. Is there anything you
Okay.
wanted to say?
Just appreciate you and good talking to you. And we'll do it again.
All right,
Next
Stuart.
time, let's focus on prison reform and criminal justice reform.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's excellent. So I'm just
Oh,
going to do a little closing and then we'll sign off.
okay.
So, as always, please do your own research and come to your own conclusions. This show is always made in hopes that never again will the truth be lost in translation. Thank you for listening today. This is Simone and Stewart signing off.
Cool. Thank you, man.
Let me see. Let me turn it off. uh,
We went there,
oh,
what,
there we
two
go.
hours?